Hey there, welcome to the DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to go over the Saturday NBA DFS slate at DraftKings. 4-game slate, pretty small, but still could be a fun one. So let's get into it. We're going to go game by game, team by team, because it's a smaller slate and it's a little bit more digestible if we go that way when there are fewer games. If I help you out in any way, please smash that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel so you get alerted to videos like this. Every time we push out a slate. Should put out a main slate week 13 NFL DFS video too, so be on the lookout for that. All right, let's dive in here. If we sort it by team, let's just look at the Sixers first. Philly and Detroit. In Detroit, this game has a 215 total, so it is the lowest total on the slate, but it's only got a 2-point spread. Sixers could be very undermanned in this game. There's no Joel Embiid for sure. We know that much. And then also Paul George is questionable, and Caleb Martin is also questionable. And then we have Kyle Lowry still out. And I guess Reggie Jackson is worth noting. He's also questionable. So, long story short, we will have value here for sure, no matter what. If Paul George is in, the value on the wings is a little bit less appealing. But if he's out, rookie Jared McCain has been awesome. He's playing big minutes. He's cooled down a little bit over his last few games, 30 or fewer points, or 30 or fewer fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, and under 25 in each of his last 2. But he played 41 minutes last game. So at 7.3K against the Pistons, if Paul George is out, he looks really good. I don't have a problem with him at all. He would come in with the second best projection. He already does come in with the second best projection for Philly. But if Paul George was ruled out, he would get a boost, and I think he would be a little bit too cheap at 7.3K. So he looks fine. If Paul George is in, I don't really have much interest in him. I think anytime somebody plays that many minutes, you can definitely entertain that and you can play them. But if he's not going to have monster usage, then I'm a little bit less interested with his elevated price tag now at 7.3K. Tyrese Maxey looks awesome no matter what. I mean, Maxey plays huge minutes, has a huge role. I think Paul George being in there would bring his ceiling down a little bit, but at 8K, I mean, it's just a low salary. So you're kind of getting a major discount either way. Obviously, Embiid being out opens up a lot of usage for whoever's out there. So Maxey, given his ceiling and floor, I mean, last game he played 45 minutes, had 39 real points, 69 fantasy points. So just really too cheap for me to overlook. I think if I'm going to play a Sixer, no matter what, it would be Maxey. And then the other guys, it kind of would depend on who's in or out. So with him beat out, we can definitely look at Andre Drummond at 5.5K. He played 29 minutes last game against Houston, so that was nice to see. Did not get his coined double-double, but he still had 23 fantasy points in 29 minutes. He has not really been taking advantage of the games where Joel Embiid is out, but there is still that upside as long as he starts. At 5.5K, he would still absolutely be on my radar. A little bit hesitant to pull the trigger on him just because they do have other bodies, namely Yabusele, 5.4K, basically the same price. He's been better, 43 minutes, 38 fantasy points in his last game. So if I had to pick one, I would prefer him. But if all the ownership is going to flock towards him, we can absolutely pivot to Drummond. The other thing noted, Yabusele is power forward eligible too, so he just gives you a little bit more versatility in your lineup. So I do prefer him. If we're looking at minutes and floor and ceiling, or not ceiling, I think minutes and floor, I think he's a safer play. I think Drummond just naturally has a higher ceiling, so Drummond still is in play with Embiid ruled out. Yabusele would look really good, even better if Paul George and or Caleb Martin are also out. If Paul George and Caleb Martin are out, or either of them are out, also Kelly Oubre looks really good at 5.2K. He might go a little bit overlooked on this slate, whether those guys are in or out. I think he's still fine at 5.2K if Paul George is in, but I would be less interested. And then Caleb Martin at 4.8K. If he is in and Paul George is out, he looks like a good value at 4.8K as well. I only played 13 minutes last game. But he's got this back issue, so I would expect him to play pretty good minutes if he is in and Paul George is out. So keep an eye on the news for that. Right now, though, I think Maxey is a smash play no matter what, with Embiid being out, and then everybody else is in play. I think if I'm going to build a core with Philly at all, it's going to start with Maxey and Yabusele. So they look really, really good. And then if Paul George is out, we can start looking at more and more Sixers as we go. All right, let's go over to the Pistons side. Anytime Embiid's out, the Sixers are a pretty good matchup for opposing teams. And then if you also take out Paul George, he's also a good defender with his length and athleticism. So, I mean, Philly becomes not that scary of a matchup. So the Pistons look pretty good here at home, as the spread would indicate. Cade Cunningham remains good as always. The matchup against Philly, up top against guards is not very appealing. And he only put up 42 fantasy points in the previous meeting with them, but he's been cooking. He's had 50 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games. He has monster usage, and he's back and healthy. He had missed a couple games. But he played 33 minutes in his first game back at 52 fantasy points and a double-double. So I have no issue with playing Cade Cunningham. If he's going to get overlooked, he has a solid projection, and the matchup should be better than expected. But I would monitor the ownership a little bit because there are some other studs on the slate that I do have interest in, and he's pushing 10K for his price, which is a bit high. Jaden Ivey is priced out. Obviously, there's always the possibility you could argue him as a tournament play, but 7.6K is very, very steep for a guy who is very scoring dependent. The matchup grades out okay. He's been good, but his price is where it's at because Cade was out for a couple of games. So, the projection is not amazing. The price isn't very appealing. So I'm out on Ivy. I'm going to take a stand there and not play Ivy at that price point. Jalen Duren, his minutes have been wonky all season long due to foul trouble or whatever. But he does still have a ceiling, 41 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. But boy, oh boy, does he have a floor. He's had 20 or fewer fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games too. So it's just like, what are you going to, it just depends what Duren shows up. I mean, he does project okay for the minutes he's projecting for, and no Embiid to deal with. So it could be a softer matchup than usual. I just think his price is a bit steep for the projected minutes and overall projection. I think he's an okay tournament play just because he does have a ceiling. But I don't really want to go there at 6.6K. I think Tobias at 6.2 is still in play. Malik Beasley at 6K is a little bit overpriced given the return of Cade Cunningham. And I don't really feel like I need to take a dive with anybody else. Isaiah Stewart and Tim Hardaway Jr. are projecting for over 20 minutes. So if you want to pivot off of other chalk that is kind of in that price range or just want to get a value, to open things up for you a little bit that really nobody's going to be on, I think Tim Hardaway Jr. and Isaiah Stewart are okay, just not priorities for me whatsoever. All right, one of the better games of the slate that probably won't get overlooked would be the Wizards and the Bucks. The issue here is really blowout risk. The Bucks are 15-point favorites at home. The game does have a nice 229 total, so if Washington can keep it close, this game is very, very stackable. Jordan Poole for the Wizards starts it off. 6.7K is a little bit too cheap for his role and upside. He comes in with a pretty modest 35-point fantasy projection and a lot of ownership. So if he's going to be super chalky, I don't mind going away from that and maybe kind of leveraging that with other Wizards. Or, just going away from Washington in general because they are massive road dogs. They are without Sadiq Bey forever and always. He remains out. And, of course, Kyle Kuzma is also out. So, again, that opens up a lot of usage for Jordan Poole. So he does, in a vacuum, look really good, and it is a pretty good matchup. He's going to be, facing Dame Lillard. That's not a scary matchup at all. And the game should be fast-paced with little defense. And if it does stay close, Jordan Poole could be a smash play. I'll just keep an eye on the ownership and how you feel about that and what other guys are in that price range. But in a vacuum, Jordan Poole looks like a really, really good play on the slate, and I feel like his projection is actually a little bit light. But if you're really worried about the blowout risk, there is another really, really appealing game on the slate that we can kind of, look at to get away from him. So the other Wizards are a little bit more appealing to me just because they're cheaper. Bilal Coulibaly is only 5.9K. He's got a decent projection. He's going to play monster minutes. The matchup and pace and everything for this, from a DFS perspective, the setting looks good. So I have no problem with him. Alexander Sarr at 5.7 is also fine. He's been smashing of late. Obviously, no Kuzma being there helps him when it comes to minutes. He can get a bit handsy with foul trouble, but the Bucks do not stop you down low really. So I don't have any problem with him at 5.7. I do fear the foul trouble issue a little bit. Obviously, Giannis is going to try to take it inside quite a bit, so that could be a problem. But as far as value goes, he is a very solid lower mid-range option based on the expected role and matchup. Malcolm Brogdon at 5.7K, not super interested in that price coming up with Jordan Poole back. He's okay given the DFS setting here, but just not a priority for me. JV busted as massive chalk the last game for the Wizards. That doesn't mean we can't go back to him at 4.7K, but the minutes have just not been there. We know he's a good points per minute guy, but he's maxed out at like 19 minutes in each of his last 5 games. they could go to him and use his size here with Giannis and Brook Lopez there, because Brook plays a lot of minutes at the 5, and then obviously Giannis plays like most of the game for the Bucks. So I think JV's fine. If he's gonna be chalky, I'd go away from him, find something else. But he projects well for his limited role. He did well. I should say 2 games ago he was massive chalky, only had 9 fantasy points. And he was in a really good spot the game before that, only had 18. And then, of course, against the Clippers, like a way worse spot, he had 29 fantasy points. So that's just how it goes, right? DFS, NBA DFS in a nutshell. But yeah, at 4.7, he's not out of play, just not a priority. I do like Keyshawn George. I don't mind Corey Kispert. I think those 2 guys are kind of interesting because they are cheap. They are the cheapest Wizards guys that I will probably be looking at. I mean, you can definitely play the blowout angle if you want. Like if you don't want to pay for Giannis, you don't want to go play Poole, you can just stack up any of these Wizards guys that are going to be coming off the bench. But I think Keyshawn George stands out the most. The Bucks do give up, threes. They don't have the best defense out on the perimeter. So Keyshawn George at 4.4K, projecting for the 3rd most minutes for the Wizards. He probably is my favorite Wizards play when it comes to value. And I don't think the blowout would affect him too much. He's a younger guy, so it's possible that even if the game gets out of control, he would be one of the guys that they keep out there a little bit. He has not been very productive lately. I will give you that for sure. But I think the DFS setting and the price have me interested just a little bit. All right, on the other side, we have the Bucks. Obviously, Giannis is the best projection of the slate. I mean, he's got the best projection at center by 24 fantasy points. So it's going to be really hard to go away from Giannis. The Wizards are a smash spot. Giannis has just a massive upside, easily the highest ceiling of the entire slate. And he's been really good, 58 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, 3 straight. He's been doing that. So he's crushing even with Dame there. 12K is a lot. It's a big salary to pay for anybody, and it is a very small slate. So it's kind of like, can you get away with fading Giannis in a possible blowout? And he only gets like 45 to 50 fantasy points, and then you go get that other stud. That's very possible. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I have no issue really with going against him and leveraging the possible chalky ownership with Dame, who is coming in at less ownership and only 9.5K. Very good matchup for Dame. And we know Dame has a ceiling. He's been showing that recently. He had 52 fantasy points 3 games ago, 66 fantasy points last game, but that was with no Giannis. So obviously with Giannis there, the Dame ceiling just isn't really as inviting. So I don't think I really want to go Dame. If I'm going to pay for somebody in Milwaukee, it's going to be Giannis. And honestly, this is a slate with no like true studs. There's no other stud to combat Giannis. So he's coming at 27% ownership right now. So I think my stance is to play Giannis. There's just nobody else that's going to really match him realistically. I mean, at center specifically, there's a huge drop off. So I don't mind. I think there's enough value to comfortably get to him. And I'm curious if the blowout risk and the price kind of deter people from going there. So if that's the case and he stays at 27% or that ownership dips, I'll be very, very interested in him for sure. And right now, as things stand, I am building around him as a core piece. Because I think on a small slate, like if he goes and gets 80, you are in major trouble if he gets 80 and you don't have him. Elsewhere, Brook Lopez plays a lot of minutes. I don't like the 6.5K price, but the matchup with the Wizards is good. His minutes and overall projection is solid, and he's not projecting for ownership. So I think he's okay at that price. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but nothing wrong with that. Obviously, with the blowout risk, Bobby Portis looks a little bit safer off the bench at 6.1K. I don't love the price. He's priced up from when Giannis missed his last game. But he's fine. He projects well for 22-minute projection, and the matchup is amazing. So if you want to go there, he looks like a solid tournament play. He is pulling 14% ownership at the moment. It's a little surprising, but I guess the field would be playing into the possible blowout. As far as value, all these other guys, Taurean Prince, AJ Green, Gary Trent, I think they're okay. They're fine punts. It's an amazing matchup. They could get extended run if the game gets out of control. So pick your poison there. I think I'd probably lean on Prince or AJ Green. Gary Trent is back in the rotation, but his minutes are always tough to trust. But I mean, if there's a smash spot for Gary Trent, this would be it. All right, moving on. We got the Warriors and the Suns in Phoenix tonight. This game has a 232.5 total. I think it's the highest of the slate. Sure is. And the Suns are favored because Steph Curry is questionable, and so is Andrew Wiggins. So that is pretty huge news to monitor. If Steph Curry's in, he looks okay at 9.5K. Projection and matchup are not amazing, but he's not going to be owned. So I think if you don't want to play Giannis, Steph Curry looks pretty interesting. He's not even 10K, and it's a pretty big game, and nobody's going to be playing him. So I think he's fine. He's just not going to be a priority for me. Now, if Steph Curry's out, we can obviously look at Andrew Wiggins at 6.3K. Draymond Green at 6.9 feels a little bit high, but if there is no Curry and if Wiggins also misses, Draymond Green would look pretty darn good. Jonathan Kuminga at 4.9K would look really good if Wiggins is out. So it's just going to really depend on what happens with these Warriors guys. If Curry is out, we can also look at Buddy Hield, Brandon Podziemski, maybe even Lindy Waters at 3.9 or Moses Moody at 3.8. So just keep an eye on the injury report. As things stand, I don't have a whole lot of interest in the Warriors. I think low on Steph Curry would probably be about it. If Steph Curry and Andrew Wiggins are out, I'd have a lot of interest in the Warriors, most notably Hield, Kuminga, and Podziemski, most likely. All right, on the other side, you have the Suns. Kevin Durant is back. He played 33 minutes after coming back from a calf issue, being out for a month, which was wild to me. But so there's no real minutes restriction on him. We can safely expect him to play quite a bit. He's probably too cheap for his upside. His projection doesn't really blow me away here, but he's not going to be owned. And due to the matchup with the Warriors, that plays into it even more so. So I think he and Devin Booker are both just fine. I think if I was going to play one of them, it would be KD. We do have to keep an eye on the news for Bradley Beal, who is questionable, and Yusuf Nurkic, who is also questionable. So that would open up quite a bit of value for the Suns. I think if Beal is in, I don't really have a lot of interest in Booker, KD, or Beal. If he's out, I'd feel a lot better about Booker or KD. And again, I'd prioritize KD there. If Nurkic is out, we can look at Oso Ighodaro, who would probably get a lot of minutes, and we can look at Mason Plumlee. These guys are way too cheap at 3.5 and 3.9K. One of them would start for sure, and I would probably just go with the guy who starts here. And that right now, I would imagine that'd be Plumlee. So 3.9K, Plumlee would look like a really, really good value. Thing is, this game is 2 hours after the first game, so you kind of have to play for that news before it arrives. And I don't have a problem with that. Just try to make sure that you have a pivot or you slide him down to utility, just so you have some wiggle room in the event that, Nurkic is in. If Nurkic is in, I really don't mind Nurkic at 6.4K. I think his minutes are a bit wonky for sure, but he just has a massive ceiling. Could always drop a Nurk alert for sure and go off here. Tyus Jones looks like a pretty good value at 5.6. He looks even better if Bradley Beal is out. He's going to get 30 plus minutes. He's been getting a ton of assists, 6+ assists in each of his last 5 games, 8+ in 4 or 5. He is dealing right now, and obviously KD back only helps him, to be honest. It lowers his personal usage rates from a scoring perspective, but I think he looks really, really good at 5.6. One of my favorite value plays on the entire slate. And of course, if Beal and Nurkic are out, Royce O'Neal at 5K, and of course, Grayson Allen at 4K would look really, really good as values too. Between the two, I would prefer Grayson because he would just get more run, on the outside with Beal out. All right, last game of the night, Dallas and Utah is my favorite game to target. I don't think I'm going to really be alone on that. Luka Doncic is doubtful. So naturally, that makes Kyrie Irving a smash play, 51-point fantasy projection, coming in with monster ownership. If you're fading Giannis, I think you're playing Kyrie. Maybe you can pair them together. I don't know. But I have no problem with Kyrie at all. The projection looks great. The matchup is amazing. There's a little bit of blowout risk here too. This game does have a 231.5 total, and the Mavs are favored by 6.5. But Luka not being there means it definitely could be closer. Klay Thompson is also already ruled out, so there's just going to be minutes to be had on the outside, and just a lot of usage to go around. So I don't mind paying almost 10K for Kyrie. Not really the strategy I'm going with right now, because there's so much value to be had in Dallas that I just don't think we need to make him a priority. Number one, PJ Washington, his price has come up to 7K, so I'm not super excited to pay 7K for PJ Washington, but he has been crushing. 49 fantasy points last game. He's had 39 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games. Obviously, he's PJ Washington. He's not going to shoot the lights up forever. He's not going to get double every single game, and eventually he's going to fail. But the matchup is as good as it gets, and Luka still remains out, and now Klay is out. Or at least, I'm sorry, Luka probably is out. He's doubtful to play, so I'm assuming he's not going to play. So if that's the case, PJ looks good at 7K. I don't have a problem with him whatsoever. Good projection and a smash spot. The only thing that deters me whatsoever would be the ownership ticking up at about 30%. It's feeling a little bit rich to pay $7K and eat a chalky PJ Washington. So I wouldn't be totally opposed to getting cute there and trying to do something a little bit different in some of my lineups for sure. Najee Marshall is another guy that's just been insane lately. His price has ticked up to 5.8K, but he has scored 20 plus real points in 4 straight games. He's not done a whole lot beyond that. So even though he's scoring like crazy, he has not had a single game in that stretch with over 32 fantasy points. So what are we betting on here? A chalky Najee Marshall to, again, score 20 plus points and hit. I think that feels like a spot where we, again, could definitely look to get underweight or make a pivot just because I don't know. It is a great matchup. He does have the usage. But I don't know how much I trust Najee to keep that going for much longer. I feel a lot more comfortable with guys like Spencer Dinwiddie at 4.3K, Quentin Grimes at 4.5K, Jaden Hardy at 4.2K if he starts. Jaden Hardy did not play very much in the last game, I don't think. Let me find him here real quick. Yeah, 16 minutes, 32 minutes with 33 fantasy points the game before. If he starts, I mean, he's in play no matter what, just because the Jazz are such a good matchup. And he's not super expensive. So 4.2K. I think you could play him no matter what, but if he starts, he looks like a really good play. But right now, I'd imagine Dinwiddie starts. And Dinwiddie at 4.3K, it looks like a core play. Coming in with ownership, I don't really care. I'm just going to play him. Probably going to play Quentin Grimes too at 4.5K. These guys are going to push for 30 plus minutes. And it's, the best match of the slate, basically. And then you have Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. Really good matchup for them too. They're kind of splitting the center minutes. I prefer, Gafford for ceiling, Lively for floor. I think if I'm going to play one of them, I would probably just play Gafford. Obviously, he is prone to foul trouble, so if you're worried about foul trouble and the price, you can save $400 and go play Lively instead. I would just monitor the starting lineup, really. And at this point, we can project Luka to be out. You can make your decision on Kyrie or PJ, but then for the other values, just see who's going to actually be in the starting lineup. All right, last one. We have the Jazz. When the Mavs are at full strength, they're not always the softest matchup, but they project to be a pretty good spot for Utah here. I mean, the Jazz are not very good, so never feels great to confide in Utah. But if we're going to play Mavs guys, it does make sense to run back with some Utah guys. So John Collins looks good at 7.2. Lauri Markkanen looks good at 7.4. Like, they're pretty nicely priced for their roles and the upside that they do offer. Right now, based off of ownership, I'm going to just prefer Markkanen. It's not like they're safe plays, but they look like pretty good plays and nice little run backs if you're firing up a lot of Mavs. Really like Keontae George at 5.9K. Just really too cheap for the role and upside he possesses. He's going to be a little bit owned, but I don't really care. I think Colin Sexton is fine, but at 6.8K, he's kind of priced out for me. Just worth noting, Jordan Clarkson remains out. Kyle Filipowski also remains out. So, there's some value to be had for Utah. And I think Keontae George is probably my favorite way to get that. Walker Kessler is there at 6.3K. Looks like a pretty good spot for him coming off a 47-point fantasy outing. He is very inconsistent. So if he's going to end up being chalky, I don't mind getting away from that. Maybe just dropping down to one of those Mavs guys is a really easy way to do that. Maybe just playing for Nurkic to be out. Or a pivot to Nurkic. Just if he's going to be super owned, I will gladly get away from him. But he is a good play as things stand at 6.3. Bryce Sensabaugh is probably the only other guy that I'm looking at here for value. He's playing 22 plus minutes in each of his last 3 games. He's playing really well. He's scoring extremely well, 13 plus real points in each of those games. So if we think that's going to keep up at 4.1K with Kyle Filipowski out, I do not mind him as value whatsoever. He is not carrying ownership at the moment. And if you're looking at these other Utah guys in terms of value, like Drew Eubanks, Johnny Juzang, Isaiah Collier, I think Bryce Sensabaugh is the play, and it's kind of interesting that he's going completely overlooked as things stand. All right, so that is going to do it for the breakdown. Honestly, it's right now, based off where the ownership is, I love the idea of building around Giannis. He is coming in as a less owned stud compared to Kyrie Irving. Kyrie is not I'm never going to say Kyrie's a bad play with Luka out. He's always a good play, but worth noting, that with Luka out in some of these games, Kyrie has delivered below expectation, quite a few times. So even though the matchup is amazing, I think my preferred strategy is to go with Giannis and then definitely attack the Dallas options. Just maybe aim on the cheaper side and let everybody else take on the risk of, hoping PJ Washington keeps crushing and stuff like that. So, all right, hopefully that helps you out. And if it does, please smash that like button. Also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.